Okay, so this video is an answer to people's requests in the comments. I am going to tell you the difference between densities and dimensions. This is a topic that they conflate these two terms. And one, densities, is not a scientific term. It is a term that came about a long time ago with the channeled readings of the law of one. And then dimensions. Dimensions is a scientific term. So people are using this word interchangeably with dimensions, and sometimes they just use the word dimensions outright wrong. So I'm going to tell you the difference between the two of those. And I'm going to share with you, since we're dealing with densities, we have to discuss the raw channeled law of one book. I'm going to be analyzing that with you, and we're going to be asking the question, is this a legitimate channeling? Did this person actually communicate with an extraterrestrial named Ra? Did the teachings that this supposed channeling brought about, is this accurate? Or is it partially true? Or is it nonsense? Is it a psyop? Are you being lied to? I'm going to give you my full opinion based on my experiences. So before we get into it, let me give you a disclaimer. I do not expect you to believe me. In fact, I don't want you to believe what I tell you. I want you to prove through your own experience whether or not I'm telling you the truth. So people come onto the channel all the time and they say, you should listen to what so-and-so says and this guy on this podcast. And I go check out those podcasts, and every single time, I'm telling you so far, every single time they have been wrong. It has been either a psyop lie, or it has been conflated with truth and falsehood, which is part of the psyop, or it's somebody that's either making stuff up or is deluded. So before we get into this, there are at least 3 or 4 categories of ET teachers, experiencers. The first one is people who have had actual experiences with actual extraterrestrials. I believe I am in that first category. This is why I don't expect you to believe me. You should prove me wrong. The way you prove me wrong is you go and do what I do. I teach you exactly how I contact and communicate with extraterrestrials, and I expect you to do the exact same thing and find out if I'm telling you the truth or not. You shouldn't believe me or disbelieve me. You should go and prove it. Unlike many of the teachers and many of the channelers who don't do that, who just expect you to take them at their word. I'm not one of those people. So first category of experiencers are the people who have actually had an experience. Second category of people are people who have been deceived and have had experiences that have to do with human fake alien abductions or fake alien experiences. There's not everybody who's interacted with the fake alien abduction paramilitary group. Not all of them have been abducted. I just recently watched a video of a guy who claimed to have communicated with future humans, and I won't get into the details of it. I could, but I'm not going to get into the details of it. But bottom line is, I found out very quickly that if he was telling the truth, which was a real possibility, that he was actually sharing an experience he had with a fake alien, the human fake alien psyop. He had real experiences. They were beyond his normal understanding, and it's actually had to do with human technology messing with his perception of reality. So first one is people who have actually experienced ETs. The second one are people who have been deceived by the fake alien abduction experience crowd. I feel for them because they don't know. The reason why I don't hold it against them is because we only know what we know about the third dimension, and if we knew that these other technologies existed, then we would go, I wonder if that's part of this. But if we've never experienced that, our only conclusion when we're faced with an experience that goes beyond our normal understanding, we could even say it's paranormal. If somebody then tells you this is from aliens, that's going to make sense and you're going to believe that. And this is what happens with abductees for the most part. A lot of abductees are waking up to the reality that they have been lied to, and it was a very, very elaborate hoax, a very believable, elaborate hoax done not by ETs, but by paramilitary humans. All right, so those are the first two, real ones and fake ones. The third one is people who are lying to you. They're just outright frauds. These are people who haven't had experiences on any level, but they want to make money, or they're narcissists and they want attention, and they know that this is how they can get all kinds of money and write books and go to UFO seminars. So the third category is just outright frauds. And then the fourth category are what we're going to address today, which are people who haven't had an experience with ETs, who have not been abducted by the paramilitary fake alien groups, are not consciously and deliberately lying. They are deluded. So there are people who are insane. They come onto my channel and leave comments all the time. I can tell by reading. By the way, I can tell in the first couple of words where your mindset is at. Not because I'm psychic, it's just I've been around, I've done a lot. So I can tell where somebody's head is at. And a lot of people are insane. They're drug addicts, or they're extremely mentally or emotionally damaged, and they have delusions. These are the same people who talk about demons and feel like they're being possessed. I've done exorcisms. The vast majority of people who claim to be possessed are just extremely mentally disturbed. So that's the fourth category. And there's a big spectrum. But these are people who are deluded. There are some people, they're not insane. They're projecting their unconscious fantasies or attachments or beliefs or delusions, and they want to believe, or they desperately want to convince themselves that they had an ET experience. So we're going to be talking about all four of those. All right? So again, don't take my word for anything. Prove me wrong. The way to prove me wrong is to do what I do. I teach you how to do it for free on this channel. You can do it today if you want. In fact, at the end of this video, I'll tell you exactly how to prove or disprove what I'm saying is true or not. All right, so we're going to get into densities versus dimensions. This is something that I was going to make a video of a while back, and I changed my mind. But since people are asking about it, I'm just going to get into it. It's going to be a long video, so settle down and be prepared. All right. So let's talk about the 7 densities according to Ra. So if you don't know, people talk about the law of one and they don't even know what they're talking about. They just spout it out like people quoting the Bible. They just quote out Bible verses, and the assumption is it's the truth. And people quote the law of one and as though it's some like UFO ET experiencer Bible. But let's be clear, it's a book that was written by people. Okay, so we have to find out what it is that they believe. Again, people throw out the word density, they throw out the word dimension. If you write the word 5D or 3D, some people see it as third density, some people see it as third dimension, and some people conflate the two and don't know the difference. So first let me say that the word density is not a scientific name. It is a name that was invented by the law of one writers of that book. They were the first people to, put out. There's nothing wrong with that. Creating a term for something, nothing wrong with that. But that's where that came from. Densities has nothing to do with actual physics or science or anything else. Dimensions, on the other hand, is a scientific term. It has to do with actual scientific laws of physics. So when you identify what a dimension is, and you throw out the word, like when people do this, people will say, I'm already in 5D. And I'm like, if you're in 5D, what are you doing in the third dimension, typing on your computer or on your phone and putting it on the internet? That's, if you were in the fifth dimension, you wouldn't be here. I wouldn't be able to look you in the face and talk to you. So you can't be in another dimension and be standing next to somebody in the third dimension and be able to look at them. If you're able to look at somebody and touch them and hear them, you're in the same dimension they are. So people don't understand what this word means. We'll get into it. So, all right, let's get started with what densities are. So again, this was created by the law of one, writers of the book. The 7 densities according to Ra. The 7 densities, they aligned with the 7 chakras. So later on, and this is very popular, there's videos all over YouTube talking about, aligning a density with a chakra. And if you move up through the chakras, you move through different densities. Basically what happened is the writers of this book, or Ra, if you want to believe that Ra is a real being, is that Ra simply changed the word from chakra to density. Okay? All right, so there's the 7 densities according to Ra. The first density, this is connected to the root chakra, or the first chakra. This density is the most basic, focused on the experience of non-self and the simple interactions of existence. It is a state of pure beingness like the elements of nature and is concerned with the fundamental aspects of creation. By the way, that is absolutely not in alignment with what the first chakra is. So again, right off the bat, this is a bad sign. If this person is claiming to channel an extraterrestrial, and they're claiming to say this is the first density, and then they'll go on to conflate it with the chakras and say this is the same alignment with the first chakra, they're already off base, because that is not what the first chakra is. The first chakra is not emptiness, being one with, that's not what the first chakra is. The first chakra is the most physicalized aspect of human existence, and it has to do with stuff. This is why babies need to be wrapped tightly in blankets, because they need to be, connected. They want security. So the first chakra is about physical security. People who have first chakra problems are hoarders. They need stuff. They need control. Does that sound like the first density here? The most basic, focused on the experience of non-self. Right there, you're in a whole different world. So right there, we've got a problem. What's the second density? Second density, in this density, the focus shifts to the concept of self and the beginning of experiencing through the senses. This level is characterized by exploration and experimentation as beings learn to interact with the world and gain knowledge through their senses. Again, the second chakra, that's not what the second chakra is. The second chakra is about immature first experiences of individuality. That's why teenagers need to go out and rebel and dance and be sexual, because they need to express themselves. They need to be different. You don't understand me, mom, dad. That's the second chakra trying to express its childish creativity. This is where creativity comes from. That's not what we're talking about here. The focus shifts to concept of self. That's accurate. The beginning of experiencing through the senses. It's not the beginning of experiencing through the senses. It's characterized by exploration and experimentation. There's some truth to that. But again, what we're doing is this is a conflation, and it's a bad conflation between these concepts and the chakras. What's the third density? Third density. This is the density most familiar to humans, where the emphasis is on ego and learning through experience, often focusing on the physical world and the pursuit of pleasure and survival. You can hear the spiritualization. You can hear the condescension. You can hear that this isn't very spiritual. This is where people throw out the word ego. And this is, one of the main things that bothers me about spirituality in general is this hatred of the ego. And the ego is absolutely necessary. And I'm here to tell you that in higher dimensions, you have a big ego. Now, you're not selfish, you're not destructive, but you absolutely have a sense of self. Where do you think gods come from? Gods have huge egos, but they're also higher dimensional beings. They're full of love and compassion. But this idea that the ego is bad, this is false religion. This is false spirituality. And it comes from, it's a projection of self-hatred. So people think that humility is not having a self and not having an ego, and that's pure, complete bullshit. Again, I'm talking from my experience. You can believe me or not believe me. But the need to not have an ego is actually your projection of having an ego. And the people who proclaim to not have an ego are the ones with the biggest ego. They're virtue signaling to everybody how spiritual they are because I don't have an ego. I see this all the time in religion and even in Eastern religions. This is huge. So here you see this, that the third density is bad. You're already getting this idea that the third density is bad. It's non-spiritual, and then they're sort of they're condescendingly saying, "Oh, but it's the soul experiencing itself and experimenting, and it's just so judgmental." I don't like it, as you can tell. But this is what people most associate with the third dimension. So 3D, if you throw out the word 3D, there's a lot of people that conflate third dimension with third density, 3D, ego. And again, there's some truth. It's not that there isn't some truth to this. It's just a conflation of understanding. So this is the third density according to Ra. Fourth density. This density is about emotions and their understanding, and beings learning to express and regulate their feelings. Oh my God. It's a stage of higher emotional awareness and growth. So this is supposed to be the fourth chakra, which is the heart. The third density is supposed to be, I'm touching my navel, is the navel. And the navel is the source of the physical self. It's your identity. There's a difference between ego and identity. Ego is just Latin for I. Ego sum is Latin for I am. In Greek, ego eimi, I am. So ego just means I. But identity is what you identify with. So I am a 62-year-old male surfer YouTuber. That's my identity. It's not who I am, it's how I identify myself. So that's true about the third dimension. The third dimension is really focused on identity. We'll get into that, the frequency of identity. But that shifts. You still have an identity in higher dimensions. Trust me, you do. It's not like when you leave this life and your soul goes to a higher place, you have no identity. That's not what happens. I used to believe that. It's very easy to believe that, but that's not what happens. I'm here to tell you that everything I've learned through experience about higher dimensions is exactly opposite from what we have been told, from what we perceive, from what we project on what we think is outside of this. And there's aspects to it that are so bizarre that has no correlation to this world. So there's some truth. Again, we're conflating truth with nonsense here. The third density has to do with the self. The fourth density, supposed to be the heart, is about emotions. So that's, again, they're taking the fourth is the heart, and the heart is the center of emotions. That is true. So this is where they're taking that. So I'm going to get into the people who actually wrote this book, and I'm not doing it to attack them. I'm just going to show you, because people, again, it's like the Bible. People just believe what they're told. And if enough people go around and say the law of one, the law of one, the law of one, oh, well, then that's the truth. Oh, I'm going to read the law of one so I can learn about spirituality and ETs and channeling. And it's a guy who wrote a book. That doesn't qualify him for anything. I've written books. I've got 2 books on ETs. That in itself doesn't prove anything. It's just my experience. So anyway, we'll keep going here. 4th density is about emotions, blah, blah, blah. 5th density. In this density, knowledge and intellect are emphasized, with beings focusing on understanding and expanding their knowledge base. So this is supposed to be the 5th chakra, which would be your throat. So I don't know where he comes up with that. Again, it's hit and miss. When he wants to conflate it with the chakras, he does. When he doesn't, he does this. But take that for what it is. On the surface, there's nothing wrong with combining knowledge and emotion and basically critical thinking. Nothing wrong with that. Okay, you want to call that the 5th density? Go ahead. 6th density. This density is about love and spiritual understanding, where beings learn to integrate their emotions and intellect into a cohesive whole. That would correspond with the 3rd eye chakra. It sounds good, but that's actually what he just described as what's supposed to happen in the heart. But again, take it for what it is. That's supposedly the 6th density. The 7th density, the highest density, where beings achieve mastery and spiritual unity, integrating all aspects of themselves into a state of pure love and light. Here that's where the term love and light must have come from. And this corresponds with the 7th chakra. And so you can see the superficial connection to that. Anyway, these are the 7 densities. I'm not going to analyze them any further. As you can tell, I've already spilled the beans that I don't buy it. It sounds like New Age superficial nonsense to me. I'm annoyed. I would have been less annoyed if they had just kept the 7 densities as they were, because there's a logical progression. It's not an accurate progression, but it's a logical progression from a 3rd dimensional mindset about what most humans think spirituality is on a superficial basis. And if you merge it with biblical and with Eastern religion and you put it all in a big mishmash so you sound good to everybody, this works with that. And by the way, this is why it's so popular. Because it's just a mishmash of the most superficial things that make people feel good. Anyway, I could go on and on and on. Obviously, you can tell I don't like it. But densities is a made-up word. It's got nothing to do with actual physics. It is something that these people want you to accept. And again, we know if you research them and if you go online, you'll find out they deliberately conflated densities with chakras. And as I've already shown you, they did a poor job, and it's a bad conflation. They didn't really think it through. But according to the book, this is what Ra teaches. So who is Ra? Ra is supposedly a group of extraterrestrials that call themselves Ra. All right, so now let's get into the difference between dimensions versus frequencies, because that's really what they're talking about. When they talk about densities, they're really kind of talking about frequencies. And I don't agree with their 7 levels of frequencies, but that's the idea. The idea is that. I don't agree with their definitions of it, but that's really what they're saying. So what is the difference between dimensions and densities? So alternate universes versus dimensions. Well, first let's talk about dimensions versus frequencies. So this is something that I am not completely, I don't completely know this. I can't look at you and say I know this for a fact. This is my understanding based on my experiences. I'm prepared to be wrong about this. But this is where I'm at. I'm going to tell you later, I'm absolutely certain about these things. This is one where I'm trying to work it out. So I believe that within the 3rd dimension, there are varying frequencies. So I believe that it may be possible that you could be in the 3rd dimension and be in a higher frequency, meaning that if you shifted to a higher frequency, you would no longer be physically visible to me. And so a lot of people, I think, conflate frequencies with dimensions. When we talk about 5D, I'm of the opinion right now, based on my experiences, and I'm prepared to be wrong, but I'm of the opinion that what we call 5D is a higher frequency of the third dimension. Meaning it has all the properties of the third dimension, or most of the properties of third dimensional existence. Hold on to that. I'm going to explain to you what a dimensional existence is. So I believe that what we call 5D very likely may be a higher frequency of a third dimensional physical existence. But it won't be this frequency. And so that means that if you're in this higher frequency and somebody like your family member doesn't shift to that higher frequency, they won't be in that world with you. They'll be in a lower third dimensional version of Earth. Okay? So let's keep going. This gets pretty complicated. So that's dimensions versus frequencies. Alternate universes versus dimensions. So people, even movies, science fiction movies do this all the time. Somebody will go through a wormhole and come out the other side, and it'll be another world. It might be the same Earth, but something has changed. People are wearing different clothes, or they speak a different language, or the sun rises from the west to the east. And then some character will inaccurately say, we went to an alternate dimension. They didn't go to an alternate dimension. I can tell because I'm watching the movie. They're clearly in the third dimension. The physical spatial properties are of the third dimension. What they've done is they've gone to an alternate third dimensional universe. So that's a whole different thing. I don't know if alternate universes exist. I'm of the opinion that they don't, unless we're talking about frequencies, and then I don't care, we're just throwing different words around. But that's what people oftentimes mean when they say alternate dimension, or when they say I shifted to another dimension, or I shifted to a higher dimension. Lots of times what they mean is they mean an alternate universe. And that's not the same. Because within each dimension, if that exists, if there are such things as alternate universes, then within each dimension you could have infinite numbers of alternate third dimensional worlds where you walk, and you have everything, the physical properties of this third dimension will be there, but it'll be a completely different world. So that's what that would be. All right. So that's the difference between alternate universes and dimensions. And you can tell if somebody knows what they're talking about, if they know the difference, and you can tell when somebody doesn't. Most people don't. And they throw around the word dimension and conflate it with alternate universes and frequencies, and they don't know what dimensions really means. And I'm harping on this because once you've experienced higher dimensions, you become very aware of the difference when it comes to dimensional realities. And what I'm trying to tell you is that dimensional differences is what is key here. This is what all of this hinges on. By the way, this is how I know if somebody has interacted with actual extraterrestrials, because they will talk in such a way where you can tell immediately they're talking about other dimensions. Whereas people who have been abducted, they won't talk about other dimensions. They will describe a third dimensional experience that might have some paranormal aspects to it, meaning things that are beyond their normal experience. And they conflate that with higher dimensional experience. Got me? So I can tell almost immediately if somebody's been to an alternate dimension. I don't mean alternate, a higher dimension. When somebody's been to a higher dimension, they will talk in a way that the average person might not pick up what they're saying, but I'll know immediately. And there are things that you can't make up. So this is how I know. One of the ways I know somebody hasn't communicated with actual ETs or actually gone to higher dimensions is they will create a fantasy reality that would sound like a movie. It would sound like a science fiction movie or a fantasy movie. And that's because from the third dimension. If you've never been above the third dimension, you can only imagine a third dimensional reality. So you'll create a fantasy, and I can tell the difference. And those who have been to other dimensions also can tell the difference. So I sound like I'm full of myself, but I can tell almost immediately when somebody is either imagining it, or they're lying, or they've actually experienced higher dimensional interaction. So alternate universes versus dimensions. All right, so here's what science doesn't okay, let's get into what dimensions are. All right, here's what a dimension is. It's like when, surfboards have dimensions. And when I want to buy a surfboard, I'll go and I'll look up the dims, which means I'll look up the dimensions. How long is it? How wide is it? And how thick is it? That's the third dimension. So the third dimension is made up of 3 dimensions. Forward and backward is one. Up and down is another. Left and right. Those are the 3-dimensional parameters. It creates a box. And so there's only so many ways that you can interact with your physical space when you're inside of a box. That's the third dimension. The third dimension is not the third density. The third dimension doesn't mean focusing on the ego. That's not what the third dimension means. Third dimension means up, down, forward, backward, left, and right. Period. End of story. Now, there are certain physical properties. All of what we know is physics. The laws of physics are actually the laws of physics within the third dimension. And this is where scientists, scratch their head, because they want to know what are the laws of physics in the fourth dimension, the fifth dimension. And if you want to know that, you can look it up. You can go on YouTube. There's some really great videos to know what it would be like to live in the fifth dimension, the sixth dimension. And they'll start going through the laws of physics that we know and what can happen. For instance, in the fourth dimension, you can be in multiple places, physical locations, at the same time. In the third dimension, you can only be in one specific place at any given point in time. That is one of the properties of the third dimension. So when you go to a higher dimension, and as I have, and you've experienced being in multiple places or multiple times, it's very, very challenging. You come back to the third dimension and you don't know how to put it all together. When you're back in the third dimension, your brain wants to understand things from the third dimension, and it's just crazy. Absolutely bizarre. So that's the difference. So the fourth dimension would be forward, backward. This is physically, you would interact in the fourth dimension, forward, backward, left and right, up and down, and then there would be another direction that we can't comprehend that would be at a right angle to that. And people have theorized that that direction would be up and forward and down and back. And some people would say that's time. I don't know if that's true or not. There's debate about that. But that would be the fourth dimension. There would be a whole other direction. Now, here's what I've learned. That each dimension has a certain level of energy, like electromagnetic energy. And every time you go up a dimension, the level of electromagnetic energy increases hugely. What's the word? I keep wanting to use that word and I always forget it. It increases exponentially. So this is one of the ways you know you're interacting with a higher dimension, because the energy that hits you will be exponentially more intense than anything you've ever experienced. And you won't be able to put it into words. One of the first symptoms of higher dimensional energy, meaning an energy coming from the fourth dimension or above, when it hits you, one of the first things that happens is you feel like you can't breathe. You feel like there's a pressure on your chest. That's actually not what's happening. And then what you do very quickly is you go, I feel I can't breathe. And then you go, oh, wait, I can breathe. But you still feel this weird pressure. What that is that's your physical third dimensional body trying to understand this higher dimensional energy, and it can't. So it panics. And that's one of the things. You feel anxious, you'll feel anxiety, your heart rate will go up, and you'll feel like there's pressure on your chest. That goes away, by the way. I don't feel pressure on my chest anymore. I still feel the anxiety. I know immediately when a higher dimensional being is trying to communicate to me, because I can feel their energy. And one of the first symptoms is what feels like anxiety. So again, that's not something somebody would imagine. If they're a third dimensional person trying to convince you, they're lying to you, or they're deluded and they're fantasizing, they're not going to start talking like that. They're going to start saying something that sounds good. It sounds like something that came out of a movie or a book. So that's the fourth dimension. Now, the fourth dimension, the emotional energy is also increased. Now, one of the things that tells you that the law of one is not accurate is because they present Ra as this super intellectual being that doesn't have emotions, and they conflate love with emotional dissociation. A lot of people do this. People have been doing this about ETs forever. Take me to your leader. That the first thing you do when you want to mimic a supposed alien is you talk like you are a computer. You don't have any emotions. And Whitley Strieber, who's written all those books, who has been abducted. And of course, my belief is that Whitley Strieber is a victim of, MK Ultra, fake alien abduction nonsense. One of the things he said recently, I heard him say it on one of his podcasts, that he says that ETs don't have any creativity, that they're incapable of thinking creatively. That is the opposite of a higher dimensional experience. In higher dimensions, the creativity increases exponentially. The emotions increase exponentially. Now, higher dimensional emotions you could talk about densities. This is right. Lower density emotions. This is an accurate description. Lower density emotions are anger, fear, those kinds of negative, lower vibrations. That's accurate. Those emotions don't exist in the fourth dimension, unlike what David Icke would tell you. Again, somebody who has never been in higher dimensions, I can tell, because he can't describe it accurately. He describes it based on people's fears and projects that and says they came from the fourth dimension. Well, it's impossible. If you come from the fourth dimension, it is impossible to have anger, hate, fear, not from any religious or spiritual point of view, but because of the simple frequency, the vibration of the energy in higher dimensions. So those emotions disappear or are severely reduced. And the emotions that are increased are the emotions of love, the emotions of empathy, the emotions of kindness, also laughter. Also, they're jokesters. Higher dimensional beings love to laugh and they love to joke. And they are so unguarded with their emotions and with their love. And they don't get offended. They're like, if you take the best parts of puppies and kittens, all of that, and put it into a super intelligent person, that's what you get in higher dimension. You don't get some being who says, take me to your leader. I'm a Vulcan. I am not burdened by these human emotions. I am beyond that. It's the opposite. They're so full of love. They are so full of happiness, joy, bliss, orgasmic bliss. So that is because in the fourth dimension, and I'm just talking about the fourth dimension, in the fourth dimension, these emotions increase exponentially, including bliss and joy. So the closest, I'm telling you, the closest you get to what it feels like to be in the fourth dimension or above is orgasms. And I think that's why we like them so much. They remind us of, what it's like to be in higher dimensions. I'm not saying that higher dimensions are purely sexual. I'm just saying the bliss is so explosive. And so this is one of the ways you know. Again, how I know Whitley Strieber was abducted by humans is that he says point blank that aliens have no creativity. Forget the fact that these aliens violate your physical boundaries and abduct you and experiment on you against your will and frighten you, make you scream, and put things in your body in places that don't feel good. Despite that obvious disconnect, it's clear that he's dealing with the human and humans, third dimensional humans. If they want to pretend to be aliens, they're going to pretend to not have emotions. So it makes perfect sense. A narcissist creating his fantasy of an alien, he's going to make an alien that doesn't have any emotions and doesn't have any creativity. All right, so that's the difference between dimensions and alternate universes. We talked about what dimensions are. Okay, you get it. So what science doesn't understand yet, that's what I just talked about. What science can't figure out mathematically because it doesn't translate is the emotional. So I think it would make sense to a scientist if you say that the electromagnetic energy increases exponentially when you go to a higher dimension because you've got another direction. So you have to have that much more energy to have that other direction. So when you go to 5, 6, 7, you're increasing the electromagnetic energy exponentially. But what they can't get is the emotional part because that's not something you can quantify mathematically. So, but that's also increases exponentially, the emotions, the higher emotions. Anyway, let's keep going. And again, this is from my personal experience. I didn't read it in a book. I didn't hear it in a podcast. I've never heard anybody talk like this. This is my personal experience that I'm sharing with you, and I proved it through experience. You can believe me or not believe me. You can think I'm crazy. You can think I'm making it up. You can think I'm deluded. You can think whatever you want. But if you want to find out, go do what I do, and you'll find out. You'll find out if I'm telling the truth or not. Those of you who have done the interdimensional meditations, who have done this, you're nodding your head. You know exactly what I'm talking about. All right. Why it's impossible for ETs to harm you, I already talked about that. That has to do with the frequency of higher dimensions. And in higher dimensions, the lower frequencies of anger, fear, abuse, all those horrible, evil, bad things, feeling isolated. All of those things. By the way, all those negative feelings come from feeling isolated and unloved and unprotected and unconnected. When you feel that way, you get angry, you get frightened, you get all that stuff. So in higher dimensions, the first thing that happens is you're connected emotionally, spiritually, energetically to all other conscious beings. And so that there's no place for fear or anger because fear and anger comes from feeling isolated and alone. So again, for David Icke to say that they came from the fourth dimension, it clearly he doesn't understand. I know for a fact he's not thinking that it's the third dimension plus an extra direction. He's talking about an alternate universe. So he's calling it the fourth dimension. He's just throwing stuff out. Listen, I don't know David Icke, but I know for a fact he has not experienced it. I can tell you, I could go into some personal things that if you do research on him, research his early days, you'll find out. You'll find out what kind of guy this is. So throw away all that, anything that's based in fear. Anybody that tells you that there's evil aliens, anybody that tells you that false beings of light from the fourth dimension, they're simply repeating what somebody else has said, and or they're projecting their own third dimensional isolated experience, which is their fears, onto something outside of them. It means they can't explain it. So if you throw it into the fourth dimension, then nobody can prove you wrong. It's just a cheap. Anyway, so anybody talks about higher dimensions or beings from higher dimensions and attaches fear to it, they don't know what they're talking about. They haven't experienced it. The third Earth, third dimensional frequency. All right, uh, so there's the actual third dimension, right? Up, down, left, right, backwards, and forwards. That's the limit of the spatial third dimension. All of the physical laws within the third dimension. Our physical experience moving around, our emotional experience, our psychological experience. That's that's our third dimension. As I said, I believe that there are varying frequencies within this third dimension. And so what is happening now is we are shifting to a higher frequency. At the very least, if you want to call that 5D, fine. If you want to call that the fifth density, fine. I don't care what word you use, those aren't accurate, I don't think. But as long as the understanding is we're shifting to a higher frequency where we live in a space where we're less affected by the feelings of isolation, fear, anger, etc., etc., that's a different frequency. Now, bear in mind, each frequency has an addiction to it. So one of the things that happens is once you're within a frequency, you unconsciously believe that frequency is what's keeping you alive. And if you start going outside of that frequency, it starts to feel like you're dying. So this is spiritual death. This is what the Jesus myth, Jesus never existed, just to tell you. That's another video. The Jesus myth of dying and resurrecting and awakening, and the myth of Odin, who died to himself on the tree of life and then became the king of the gods. This is dying to the ego of a certain third dimensional frequency, which can be accurately described as what we call the ego, the identity. So this is where people talk about letting go of your attachments. They're talking about the attachment to this particular frequency. And that is a difficult, challenging experience. I know from personal experience, this shift is not an easy thing on the ego. Psychologically, it is very challenging. And it's simultaneously very blissful and very wonderful. And at the same time, it brings up a lot of challenging emotions. So the idea that, anybody who talks about I'm in the fifth dimension, I'm always floating on, my farts and all of that. I mean, that's somebody that's either deluded or lying to you, or both. But if somebody's really going through it, they'll tell you how challenging it is. So let's see, the Earth 5D frequency. So I've already talked about that. I think it's a higher frequency within the third dimension. We can call it 5D if we want. By the way, the light beings never use those terms with me. They never use the term 5D or 3D. They don't even use the term dimensions. So, I might be looking at it from a third dimensional perspective where we have to see it that way. They don't see it like that. They don't talk about it like that. Why interdimensional meditation is so powerful. So on my channel, twice a week, we do these live guided interdimensional meditations. You can go to the live section on the YouTube channel, and there's hundreds of them. It's free. It is the most valuable resource I offer to you, and I'm telling you, if you listen to the video I uploaded last night, those of you who know, all the details of my past Atlantis life thing, you will know that this is my karmic duty. It is my karmic duty to create a bridge, and these meditations are me burning off my karma. So these are free. I don't charge for this. It's the most valuable service I can give, and I'm going to be doing this until I die and or I shift to a higher frequency. I'm going to be leading these interdimensional meditations. The reason why they're so powerful is because astrally, when you're conscious in your 3D mind and you astrally go and experience higher dimensions and communicate with higher dimensional beings, it is the single most powerful way to expand out of this third dimension. There's a reason why there's only a small number of people who come to my meditations. And that reason is because not everybody is ready for the expansion of consciousness that comes from these meditations. everything that I learned about spirituality has been turned on its head. Basically, everything I was ever told is completely wrong. Everything. You can find out personally. Again, you want to prove me wrong? Do the interdimensional meditations. You'll find out if I'm telling the truth or not. You'll find out almost immediately. Okay, that's not what I want. Where are we? Are we here? No, we're here. Okay, so that's why interdimensional meditation is so powerful. All right, so what are dimensions? I already talked about that. So let's now talk about Ra. Let me tell you why this is wrong. And again, some people are going to get their feelings hurt because, look, I'm here to tell you, based on my experience, that 99% of everything you've heard about extraterrestrials is wrong. And as I said, there's 4 different categories of people. There are people who have had actual interdimensional ET experiences. There are people who have had the fake alien abduction experiences. There are people who are liars, who are fraudsters, who go around and go to all of the UFO conferences and write books and talk about alien abductions and spiritualize them, and they've never experienced a damn thing, and some of them don't pretend. David Icke, I've never heard David Icke ever once talk about his experiences in higher dimensions, and yet he talks about what the astral realm is, as though it's some evil, bad place. He has no idea what he's talking about. He's talking out of his ass, and I say that because he doesn't have any personal experience in it. And you can't talk about something if you haven't experienced it. And that's why he's spreading so much fear. And that's why he's so popular. Because fear is part of the addictive frequency of the third dimension. That's why everybody loves it. That's why people want to believe that aliens abduct and torture you. They want to believe that. They want to spiritualize that, because the third dimension, this current frequency, the addiction, is the addiction to be devalued and abused. That's why religion is so horrible. That's why monotheist religions are so horrible. God created you in his own image, and yet he fucked up so bad that you're sinful, and his ego can't tolerate the thought that he made a version of himself that's imperfect, so he has to throw you in hell. He doesn't destroy you, he throws you in hell and tortures you forever. Tell me that's spiritual. In what reality? If a human being acted like that, we would lock them up and say they were psychopathic murderers. When God does it, it's spiritual. This is the third dimensional addiction to being abused and devalued. That's why people like David Icke. That's why they like the idea of evil ETs. That's why they like the belief in Anunnakis. That's why they like the belief in false beings of light trapping you and torturing you. It's part of the third dimensional addiction. And if you're addicted to it and you're offended because I'm telling you this, and you want to unsubscribe and leave a shitty comment, because I'm telling you, you don't have to be afraid. This is the thing that blows my mind. I tell people, there's no such thing as evil aliens. There's no such thing as evil beings of light in higher dimensions. All the evil beings are in the third dimension or the second dimension, and you don't have anything to worry about. You're more powerful than any of them, and you don't have anything to fear. As long as you trust the universe, you will be taken care of. You would think people would go, oh my God, thank you so much. I feel so much better. They don't. They go, F you. You're wrong. And they want to argue with me. And their definition, I mean, their justification will be, but in the third dimension, there's good and bad. So there has to be good and bad in other dimensions, by the way, that I've never been to or experienced. So I'm just going to project onto it. And your need to project that onto dimensions outside of your own is your own addiction. And we're addicted to it because it feels like it keeps us safe. I'm telling you, when you feel the love of higher dimensional beings, it will mess with you. You think that if you just got the love of God that you would, I feel so much better. No, when you feel love from a higher dimension, it destroys your third dimensional identity. You go through this very confusing experience where you're full of bliss and at the same time you're afraid you're dying. How can love make you feel like it's killing you? Because it is. It's killing that frequency that tells you you're a worthless piece of crap, that you're going to get thrown into hell, that some other being created you, or that Anunnakis created you. People want to believe this. It's very painful for me to read that. I get angry, I'm frustrated, but my frustration comes because I care. I get angry with you because I care. I get frustrated because I care. And I don't want to see my fellow human beings being addicted to being abused. And that's all the third dimension is. Listen, it's an experiment that has run its course. We've learned everything that we were supposed to learn from the third dimension. It's time to go, but you have to choose to leave. So that means you're going to have to take some actions and work past this. And one of the things you're going to do is learn how to be open and vulnerable to such a degree that you feel love to such a degree that you die to your third dimensional addictions. And when more and more people go through this, we'll be able to come together and connect, and we'll be able to create a new, higher frequency consensus that perhaps may bring a different reality. People have asked me to tell them what the ETs told me about the elites and where they're going to go. If you want me to talk about that, put that in the comments. I will talk about it, but you have to understand what I'm talking about first. You have to understand this part. Okay? I care so much about the human race, and it just drives me crazy when I see human beings addicted to their own self-devaluation. It breaks my heart. That's why I get angry. All right, so let's talk about the law of one. Here's why the law of one isn't accurate. So what I'm saying is that the writers of the book, again, it's a book written by humans, the law of one, the transmission of Ra, or whatever it's called. That obviously I'm saying that this is not accurate. Now, I believe that they're the fourth category I gave you. I believe that these are sincere but deluded human beings who are simply projecting their own internal psychological fantasies and fears and putting it in a book and spiritualizing it. So to understand that, I encourage you to do research on the people who wrote the book, specifically the guy who wrote it and the woman who channeled. So people don't even investigate this. It drives me crazy. People don't investigate the Anunnakis PSYOP. They don't investigate Zachariah Sitchin or the ancient alien. People don't investigate it. They just take whatever they're told because it feeds your fear. Oh yeah, they're evil aliens that came and they enslaved you. Oh, I feel enslaved. Well, it must be aliens. No, it's humans. Humans are enslaving you. But you're right. It's a conflation. You're right. You're being enslaved by beings that are a lot more powerful than you, that have technology that's more powerful than you are, but they happen to be humans. They're not aliens. And you choose to be abused. You choose to be a victim. You choose to be enslaved. That's the hardest part to accept. You've chosen to do it. So you can choose not to do it. That's very difficult. It's very simple, but it's very difficult. So the history behind this very quickly is that, I forget the guy's name. He was a researcher. Again, this was decades ago. I think this was in the 60s or the 70s. 60s and the 70s, I think. And he was a university researcher. And he had a hard-on for extraterrestrials. And he wanted to prove it in a lab because he's a third-dimensional person and he's virtue signaling and he wants the approval of, other scientists. But he had a thing for it. And he had a thing for channeling. So he wanted to believe that people could channel ETs, aliens, whatever. He wanted to prove that in a lab. And he had a bunch of students. And so he would find students that he would use as channels. And he had a few of them. And they stopped working with him because they didn't like it. So he didn't like that. So he found somebody who liked him and followed him and respected him, and he guilted her into it. This is open. If you read the history of it, you'll find out this is where the channeler, the woman who channeled Ra, supposedly, you'll find out that he convinced her to do it, that he guilted her into it. And you can even hear interviews of her, and she'll even mention that. She'll even mention it that, in a guilt that she was supposed to do this and she should do this and this was her gift. That was him. He told her that. Now, this guy already had spiritual ideas. So these 7 chakras, 7 densities, he already had that belief. She knew that. Now, he also had this thing about channeling, and he had this scientific method of channeling, which involved, I kid you not, it involved lighting candles behind your head and putting a copy of the Bible behind your head while you lie down and go into a trance. And he had this belief that there was this distortion or something like that, and so that the communications had to come through the candles and come through the Bible into the person's mind so that they could get, the clear understanding without distortions. This was his beliefs. Has nothing to do with science. And so now let's get into the beliefs of it. So the law of one says that there's 2 paths. One is the path of self, and one is the path of others. And according to Ra, the more spiritual you are, the more focused you are on other people as opposed to yourself. Now that sounds really good. So I want you to ask yourself, does that sound spiritual to you? Do you feel as though in order to be spiritual, you have to deny your own desires and fulfill the desires of others? Sit with that for a moment. Do you believe that if you fulfill your own personal desires, you will be harming other people? Because that is the assumption. So Ra clearly teaches this. And there's all these laws that they talk about. And one of them has to do with the more you deny yourself and give to others, the more spiritual you are. And the more that you focus on yourself and give yourself, fulfill your own desires, the less spiritual you are. And that is just the single most superficial, childish, biblical, self-hating religion that's ever existed. And the only thing that's happened is that this guy in the 60s and 70s had his own beliefs for whatever reason, and he struggled with Christianity, and he wanted to, like most people do. Again, Jesus never existed. The Gospels and the New Testament are a complete psyop. They're completely made up. There's nothing historically accurate about any of it. Don't believe me? Do some research on it. You'll find out for yourself. I'm not even getting into the Old Testament at this point. Like most people, he struggled with that. And most New Age people want to tell you. I even read a comment today on my own channel. New person, of course, they don't know my take on it. That not the biblical Jesus, but the actual Jesus. There isn't an actual versus biblical Jesus. There never was a man named Jesus. Jesus of Nazareth never existed, and I'll tell you why. Because Nazareth wasn't founded until 200 AD, supposedly 200 years after Jesus' supposed death and crucifixion. What does that tell you? And as you know, if you look, all of the oldest texts for the New Testament, you can't find any that are older than 200 AD. So what that means is that the people who wrote the Bible started writing it 200 AD. And in 200 AD, there was this city called Nazareth that was filled with a bunch of ascetic Jewish spiritual practitioners. And so that looked good. So they needed to virtue signal to the rest of the world that, hey, this guy was spiritual. Oh, let's have him born in Nazareth. Oh, yeah, that's a really cool city. All those ascetic Jews. Well, Nazareth didn't exist when he was supposedly born. So that destroys everything. And the whole foundation of the Jesus myth, the thing about Christianity for the first time in history, and the Old Testament as well, is that this is the first religion in history that says this is historically accurate. This is literally and historically accurate. And that's why in Christianity there are people called apologists. In no other religion will you will never find a Hindu apologist. An apologist is somebody who apologizes, is somebody who speaks forth defending the gospel. So they go out of their way to defend the gospel, and they will alter the truth, they'll alter history, they will alter archaeology, they will alter the evidence to fit their pre-existing belief. That's what apologist is. And so if you can disprove one thing about the New Testament, if you can disprove one thing, you've disproven the whole thing, because the entire thing is based on literalism. So modern people, modern New Age, religious, even ex-Christians, we're so ingrained with this need to have to believe in Jesus that people will create their own Jesus. They'll say, oh, Jesus really existed, but he didn't say that. He said this instead. And there's no archaeological or historical proof for any of that. They're just making up the Jesus that they want. But you can never escape the abusive part of the Jesus character, who says, I'm going to take your sins for you. I am going to forgive you your sins. You can't believe in Jesus if you don't believe that you're sinful and deserve to be destroyed. And people think that's humility. People conflate humility with self-hatred. And the whole idea of sin is a psyop made to keep you in that frequency of self-devaluation so you can be controlled. So anybody who tries to conflate Christianity with ETs or spirituality, you're going to run into some problems. Now, the ETs will never come and tell you that your religion is nonsense. They don't do that. I can do that because I'm a third-dimensional human and I used to be a Christian, and so I can tell you it's complete nonsense. And there is no such thing. The thing about self versus others, that is a third-dimensional thing, and that is what the basis of the law of one is. If you want to be spiritual, deny yourself and sacrifice yourself for others like Jesus did. And here's what I've learned. I've learned that I learned this before I communicated with ETs, but one of the first things that they said to me is they said, do you know why we chose you? And I said, no. They said, because you figured it out. And what they meant by that was I wrote a book called The Shamanic Secret Commandment to a Perfect Life. And in that book, I give a very revolutionary spiritual mindset, which is that the most spiritual thing you can do is to fulfill your own deepest desires. That is the single most spiritual thing you can do. Now, the assumption behind that, which I've proven in my life, is that if you fulfill your desires, you are automatically helping other people fulfill their own desires. Now, if you go to fulfill your own desires, you are going to run into a lot of resistance, internally and externally. And one of the first things people are going to tell you is if you commit your life to fulfilling your own personal desires, people are going to call you selfish. They're going to call you unspiritual. That's the first thing they're going to do. They're going to guilt you out of it. They're going to tell you, you need to do what we tell you, or you need to do what society tells you, or you can't just go around making yourself happy all the time. You have to live for others. And that's what the law of one teaches, that to be more spiritual, you go around and you throw yourself away and give yourself to others. By the way, go and look up the definition for communal narcissist. Go and look up the definition of a communal narcissist. And when you do, you'll find out that's exactly what Jesus is. The Jesus character is a communal narcissist. He gets glory by codependently taking on other people's problems. He takes away their self empowerment. He takes away their free will, and he does it for them. And then they become completely dependent upon him for their identity, for their spirituality, for their salvation. And this is the definition of a communal narcissist. It is one of the most abusive things somebody can do. But the mask they put on is, I'm doing this for you. I'm throwing myself away. I'm sacrificing myself for you. And why don't you love me? You should feel guilty if you don't love me. I'm sacrificing myself for you. You know, the stereotypical codependent, overprotective victim mother. I do everything for you, and you do nothing for me, and I slave over a hot stove all day. That's Jesus. He's a Jewish mother. This is the law of one, and this is why it's nonsense. I know I've offended you. I know I have. A lot of you I know are offended, and people are going to unsubscribe. I don't care. I'm not here to placate you. I'm not here to get your approval. I want to be loved. I want to be approved of. I want people to like me. I get hurt and offended when people say mean things to me. So I'm not above all that. But that's not what I'm here to do. I'm not here to tell you what you want to hear. I want to make you happy if I can, but I'm much more interested in telling you the truth. I would rather know the truth than be comfortable. And if you listen to the truth, a line supposedly Jesus said, the truth will set you free. But the truth is not an easy pill to swallow. All right, so that's my long-winded, the difference between densities and dimensions. Maybe you got something out of it, maybe you didn't. But in any case, it's coming from a place of love. I love you all. I care about all of you. And my goal in this work is to help as many people as I possibly can, and to do what I can to help the world shift up to a higher frequency. Put in the comments your thoughts, your feelings. I'll do my best. I will do my best to try and not block you if you say mean things about me. I can't guarantee it, but I'll try my best. And if you have any questions about any of it, if you want me to make videos about certain things I've said, go ahead and put that in the comments. Go here to maushan.thunderwizard.com if you want to learn some powerful practices. If you want a session with me, ask to do that. If you want to learn how to communicate with ETs and you're running into problems, you're doing the meditations, but there's internal problems, then go to contact.thunderwizard.com. I've got a video course that teaches you exactly what I do to communicate with higher dimensional beings. I'll leave it at that, my friends. Thank you so much. I wish you all the best. And please have a good day and enjoy all of the crazy stuff that's happening. I will see you all very soon.